Well, hello, and welcome to another riveting episode of My Dog Will Eat My Face. Interesting title because, insofar, he has not done that, unless you count furious licking, which may be his MO. Maybe it's just a slow removal of the face through just hours of licking. That could be his plan. Anyway, welcome back. I did want to touch on a topic that I've talked about before in some detail, but recently it's been more, I should say, pronounced in my daily life, and that's with respect to just the isolation that I've been feeling when dealing with these medical issues. Just from a mechanical standpoint, if I'm on high flow and need a 70-pound concentrator to deliver it of supplemental oxygen, I really can't go anywhere. I could use one of those e-tanks, but they're only going to last for about 30 to 40 minutes at the high 10-liter flow, which is what I would need. So that means I can only go out of my home for 30 to 40 minutes, which doesn't allow me a lot of time. So that is a physical problem of me being isolated because I'm literally isolated. Uh, the most I can do is take my dog outside for a short, 30-minute walk. And I do that sometimes when I'm feeling well enough to do it. It's not every day, I have to admit. It might be once or twice on a week if it's a good week. Um, but at least I try. I try to do that. It's good to get out. Where I live, it's very, very urban. You walk down the street, there's hundreds of other people lining the sidewalk, having meals outside, and other restaurants, and it just high-rise buildings all around you, so and very noisy. So it's a big urban area where I live. So that does actually help me a little bit because the atmosphere, I guess, of a big city helps to mitigate that feeling of isolation. So that's one of the ways I try to manage the physical issues that I have, and that's just the way it is. I don't know what more to do about it. I've gone out further to visit my cardiologist, where a friend of mine was kind enough to bring extra oxygen tanks. And when at the cardiologist office, I bogarted their oxygen out of the wall so I could turn off my tank and reserve it for the drive home. Um, so sometimes that's possible, but the logistics of it are pretty complicated, messy, and it really relies on someone else to give me a very strong helping hand. And this particular friend of mine that did help me with that, which was actually a while back in last October when I saw my cardiologist, it was a godsend. It was wonderful. So huge props to him for helping me to be able to do that. I couldn't do that on my own. I guess I could grab two tanks maybe and take an Uber if I had no one else to help me. And that, I don't know. That'd be even worse. So with a friend in a car, it was still a logistical nightmare. I can't imagine doing it all on my own, like using Uber or something. But anyway, that's an obvious cause of some of the isolation. But I've talked about it already in this podcast, and I only recently had an epiphany that um, there are other contributing factors. So it might be a little weird when I touch on this, but when I was reading some books and checking out some documentaries online, and I like to learn. I love knowledge. I think that's obvious if you listen to my podcast. And that's really all I do, not working, is I just try to absorb more and more and more knowledge because that's frankly fun to me. I have to be cognitive. I love cognitive things that test my mind and or fill it with new information that I can know and put and tie it in together with other things I already know. Sometimes I have like this eureka moment, like, oh, that explains the same thing going on in Spain at that time during Goa's dark phase. I mean, crazy stuff like that. I tied uh, that Goa phase in one of his particular paintings to a French composer's piece that was based on a 13th century uh, monk's chant. And I realized essentially that the modern, fairly modern, when was this? Like 1820s, 19th century. So the French composer manipulated this 13th century piece, and within it he named it a particular name, and at the same time, more or less, Goa in nearby Spain painted a painting with the exact same name as in the symphony. And so we realized, oh yeah, they're contemporaries. They're doing this, and they were connected, if that makes sense. So I have those eureka moments when I learn new information, and it gives me a thrill. So that's the only thing I can really do. But I've noticed that as I do that, as I gain more information, it strangely isolates me even more from most people. So that's really what I want to talk about today. If you're someone who is fairly intelligent or knowledgeable, you might have empathy with this. If you're a listener to this podcast, you're obviously intelligent. So it was an epiphany that increased intelligence or knowledge in, inversely affects your social life and isolates you more from mainstream people. So it's almost like a dual edged sword. You know more information, or you might be really intelligent, but at the same time, it's actually isolating you from others. And that's what I want to talk about today, and how it isolates you. And that, from what I've read, it's something that should be welcomed and celebrated and not being belabored as a major loss. So that's what I'll talk about today. Also, in the background, my dog is playing furiously with one of his toys. So if you hear some squeaking, it's not me. I've not started squeaking yet. That's a later phase of CHF where you just squeak. Uh, I'm not doing that. It's my dog. He's right behind me, and he might be having fun with his toys. In fact, I just heard him playing with a crinkle toy. Anyways, you might hear that in this podcast in the background, but it's not me. Anyway, let's move on. So let's dive into this a little bit. As time has gone on in my time in hospice, where I really have nothing else to do but expand my knowledge, because that's really one of the things I enjoy. I'm just a very cognitive person. The use of my brain is what gives me joy in life, frankly. And ironically, I've certainly noticed that through my time struggling with this terminal disease, but still learning more information pretty much full time, more so than I would if I were working, that friends of mine and individuals I associate with become less involved in my life. Some of them even go so far as to taunt me. I've had that happen. And on the other side, I get disgusted with a lot of the topics and discussions and things going on in mainstream and what everyone else is doing. Uh, a good example is the shooting in New York. What's his name? Was it Luigi Maggioni or something like that? Uh, I can't remember his last name, but Luigi. Um, anyway, he fully shot the CEO of a health insurance company, killed him, dead. He got away and was caught at a McDonald's in a nearby state. I think it was Pennsylvania. He still had the murder weapon on him and everything. It was in the same clothes that was caught on camera. Not very bright. But anyway, um, this is a good example because when he shot and murdered this person, friends of mine were sending me things on X and other things online that were indicia of people celebrating the murder because they see it as though he's like a Robin Hood against these health insurance companies that deny people coverage or don't pay for things. And obviously, we've all dealt with insurance companies, and it's always a pain in the butt. I mean, it's just what it is. We all know it. I don't have to explain it to anyone. Anyway, a lot of people were seeing him as like a martyr. I mean, he didn't die; he got caught, but there were all these people celebrating this individual who murdered another human being. And I understand the angst with insurance companies. Obviously, I deal with that all the time, quite heavily. And what really put me off, and I actually said this to at least one or two of my friends that were sending me these celebratory memes or X posts that were celebrating this murder, I replied with, don't send that to me. I'm not going to get on this bandwagon because no matter what, how bad insurance companies may be, we all know they're a pain in the butt. There's no mystery there. But to have the solution to murder a human being on the sidewalk is something that is absolutely unacceptable. You are starting to dehumanize people in order to celebrate that. It's like the person he murdered is not a person. He's subhuman now because he was the CEO of a health insurance company. And I flatly said to my friends, I refuse to do that because I think this is dehumanizing someone else. We should never, ever celebrate a murder for someone who's literally just doing their job and who isn't a threat, who is also someone's father, someone's husband, someone's uncle, someone's son, someone's friend. We all know one killing of just a single person is a catastrophe. I know that firsthand. I've had to attend two other memorial services for people in my life that I lost while I was in hospice. I joined it virtually. They actually had it on live stream, so I didn't go to it, but I watched it on live stream and joined it that way. And it was still very moving. I was tearing up and being moved by it because these were people in my life that died. And that's just it. We can't dehumanize people. And that is an example of my disgust with a lot of the mainstream discourse, if that makes sense. I'm only using that as an example, a very extreme example, clearly, to where in the mainstream people are celebrating it or making jokes and memes about it. Whereas I'm disgusted by that because you're forgetting that this was a human being that was murdered in cold blood. And that practice is something that just, as I already said, it appalls me. It makes me physically ill that a person could celebrate that. And there's other examples, though less severe, throughout pop culture and mainstream culture. My friends send me links on it. 90% of the time, I go, I don't even know what this is talking about. So I'm so unplugged from pop culture and mainstream right now. I don't know what the heck is going on. So they send me stuff like, I don't know what this is. You have to pretend I'm wide eyed like an immigrant just off the boat because I have no clue what you're talking about. And they get frustrated with me and whatever. But the bottom line is, more and more, I find myself withdrawn from mainstream pop culture and social interactions, isolating myself more. And why is this? Why did this change in me? Obviously, these are friends of mine that I've been friends with for years, honestly, for decades sometimes. And before these health calamities, I would go out with them quite often. I'd go out to eat with them. I'd go to clubs with them. I'd go to the bar with them, visit them at their home, whatever. And now, since I'm just further and further disgusted by mainstream culture. And I think because this is the epiphany I had, and I found that it was backed up already from very old very old philosophies that existed centuries ago. So I discovered an issue that is not new. But the issue is, to be totally blunt, the more intelligent and knowledgeable you get, the more you will be isolated from people and disgusted with mediocrity and mainstream culture. That is just a resounding fact that I discovered internally with my life. And when reading about it, I happened to discover this is nothing new. It's a known issue with human beings. The more intelligent or more knowledgeable they are, the more isolated they become. So, next I'll try to explain why that is. Well, the why, I think, is pretty obvious. As you become more knowledgeable, more introspective, if you take the time to do the self analysis that I know I have done while in hospice, and oftentimes on this podcast, I use it as my journal, and I've discovered things about myself literally as I go through the podcast. Every single one is ad libbed, by the way. There's no script. I'm just rambling my thoughts. And that leads me to very important and helpful discoveries about myself. And I think, gosh, I wish I did this when I was 14. My life would have been so much better if I had that level of introspection throughout my life. I would have just blazed through it easily. Damn it. Oh, that might be cut out. I just said a swear. Naughty me. Anyway, so when I'm already a fairly intelligent person, and I know I'm intelligent, so I'm not trying to be arrogant or depicting any sort of braggadocio. That's not my intent. I know I'm intelligent. Like I said, if you're a listener to this podcast, I would hazard to guess you too are intelligent. And there have been studies of the mind, that is, philosophy in the past, that found that intelligence, or any form of greatness for that matter, but mainly just high intelligence, I think is really focused on, naturally isolates you from others and naturally pushes you away from the majority. And when you look at it, as I've already said, I think it's kind of obvious. As you introspect on yourself and learn things about yourself, you are leagues ahead of most other people. I'm sorry, a lot of people do not take the time to be introspective. That's why psychologists say journal, journal, journal. It's a way to be introspective. And I support that because That's what my podcast is. It's my journal, essentially. And it's helped me figure out massive things that I can be at peace with within myself and experience true joy just within myself. And as you're more intelligent than the average person, and if you're around people that are not as intelligent, I'm just being blunt, they're not going to want to hang out with you because they're intimidated by your intelligence, is most likely it. Or they just simply can't comprehend it. I've had circumstances in my life personally where people have told me that they're glad I'm leaving something because every time I talk to them, they feel extremely dumb. So they're glad I'm getting out of their life. And I've had people make fun of me overtly because of something I might have shared on my podcast. And this problem for me is only increasing as an issue because I have nothing else to do but to be cognitive, self uh, self reflect, and read and attain knowledge because that is fun for me. It just is. I understand if it's not fun for a lot of people. I don't care. I don't think that's a you know. I don't think it's neither good nor bad. It's just my thing. But ironically, then it's pushed me more away from people that honestly to God, are very dear to me in some cases. Very close friends of mine have done this. And the first example I gave, I know that was kind of flaky the way I said it, but it happened when I was in the Orlando jail. If you don't know what that is, it's in my podcast under that term somewhere. And I think the first or second season, where I share my experience at the quote, scare quotes, Orlando jail. Because it wasn't a jail. What it was a rehab facility where I stayed at for over 2 months in Orlando for uh, basically alcohol treatment or alcoholism treatment, I should say. And while I didn't go there for myself by any means, I went there to try to save my marriage because my spouse was fed up with me drinking a lot because I worked in law and I had a ton of stress. I was giving depositions and terrified about being dragged into a class action, appearing before judges and courtrooms. I mean, it's a stressful gig, man. It's no shock that a lot of people that work in law are heavy drinkers. Same thing with law enforcement. I have to say, a lot of cops, when they're not on duty, get pretty hammered. I know a lot of them that do that. I've had a lot of cop friends in my life, and they have the best stories too. I'm sorry if you're like on a plane next to a police officer, that's the jackpot, man. They have the best stories and the funniest stories you'll ever hear. I'm not kidding. Of things that they experienced from being a police officer. um, Maybe someday I can share some of those stories that I've heard. Obviously, I don't have them firsthand, but it's great. Um, so I've just made the problem worse And the isolation is increased because all I'm doing is increasing my cognitive awareness and self reflection. Um, I'm sorry, I missed the point I was trying to make earlier. See, I do outlive this. I forget what I'm saying, and then I go off tangent. But the Orlando jail was not really the Orlando jail, as I said. I was trying to save my marriage. My spouse thought I was drinking too much. I went there to try to save it. I didn't think I was drinking too much. I didn't go there for me. But I finished the whole program just to try to save my marriage. But then the divorce happened anyway. So it didn't work. And to this day, I drink. I mean, not every day. Actually, I don't think I've had a drink now for months. Every once in a while with a dinner, I might have something. That's it. I've not been drunk, though, like really drunk, for probably about 5 years now. So, anyway, maybe it did stick. Because I'm not drinking nearly as much as I used to. And in my home, I have alcohol. Like I've got a full bottle of vodka in my freezer that's been aging in there for like years. I haven't touched it. Oh, I did. Wait, I take that back. I did touch it, and I used it to try to create a steak marinade because I didn't have a wine with me, but the vodka can work to help infuse the meat with the marinade. So I put a little bit of vodka in there to marinate it. That's all I used it for. So anyway, maybe it did stick. I don't know. Anyway, that's what Orlando jail is. But when you're quitting the program, everyone in the group that you're with that are in the therapy group, they pass around the room like in a circle and they say goodbye to you because you're leaving the program. You're graduating, you're going back home. And it was actually very emotional. I almost cried during it. And some of the friends I made there in those 2 months, adult men, were breaking up and were so close to bawling they couldn't even say one word. It was very emotional, actually. I did not expect that. But one guy said, I am so glad that you are at leaving now because whenever you share things with the group, I feel like a complete moron. Anyway, that long story was just trying to get to the point to say where my intelligence was a bad thing, according to this person. I mean, he was kind of joking, but there's some truth there. And that's the point of a joke. There is truth behind a joke. That's what makes them funny. So, um, I had that happen. And on one podcast, I was sharing quotes from Seneca, and a friend of mine said, what the hell is Seneca? I'm like, do you mean who? And then other friends were like, yeah, what's a Seneca? I never heard of it. Like, what are you? It's clear, and I mean, they were just making fun of me for quoting him, and off the top of my head. And that's what you experience when you're more intelligent. You get more isolation, not really from you being disgusted necessarily from mainstream. There is some of that, but it's a lot of disdain that other people have for you for being intelligent. And that is making my isolation ironically worse as I battle my disease. Already, obviously, I'm very physically isolated. But now I'm very socially isolated, apparently, because some people in my life literally walked away saying, "You're just too smart," or making fun of me because I said something that they don't understand, and walked away. It's more of the latter. They just make fun of something, saying that they don't have a clue what I'm talking about, and walk away. And I found that like 90 to 95% of the time, if I talk to my friends still to this day, a lot of time I don't know what the hell they're talking about, and they don't know what I'm talking about. They're talking about something mainstream. I have no idea what they're on about. And I might be talking about the links between Goa's Dark Face and a French composer at the same time. And they just don't know what the heck I'm talking about. So it's isolating. It truly is. And I am not the first person to experience this. There were a lot of philosophers and other people in history that experienced the same thing. As an example, Napoleon Bonaparte once said, "Solitude is the price of greatness." That puts it pretty succinctly. And similarly, the philosopher Schopenhauer wrote, "Solitude is the fate of all exceptional minds." So think about those two statements. Obviously, one from Napoleon, so a couple hundred years ago, and likewise one from Schopenhauer about 100 years ago, I think. This is nothing new. Marcus Aurelius and others even wrote about it 2,000, other people wrote about it 2,000 years ago, about this very issue. That if you're intelligent or talented, achieving greatness, your destiny is absolutely solitude. And there's no way out of that. If you are a great thinker, if you have a lot of knowledge or a lot of skill and talent, if you are a great mind, your fortune, your destiny will be solitude. Period. It's almost like it's a true natural law. So this is not new. I find examples of people writing about this, as I said, going back centuries and to 2,000 years ago. But they take it a step further. And that's what I want to really focus on here. Yes, solitude is your destiny if you are a great thinker or intelligent. But it's something to be celebrated. It is a gift. And it is not a bad thing at all. And you should celebrate your solitude. And that's what I want to touch on next. So, again, to Schopenhauer, to underscore my last segment's point, He also did write really quick, allow me to share that mediocrity generally recognizes only itself. Genius, on the other hand, sees mediocrity but finds itself alone. That's a pretty robust quote, so I'll say it once more. Mediocrity generally recognizes only itself. Genius, on the other hand, sees mediocrity but finds itself alone. So again, this is being seen as sort of a natural law, an a priori destiny, that if you have this character attribute, this is your undeniable fate. But a lot of these thinkers back in the day saw it not as a negative, but as a great thing. Marcus Aurelius, I've referred to him a lot in my podcast. I love reading his uh, meditations. Go out and get your own copy. It's good stuff. And he never actually meant to write it as a book. It was literally his journal when he was emperor of the Roman Empire. And it lasted through all those ages. I mean, the original, whatever was written on it was not paper. It was probably a skin or papyrus. It has been copied over, and now today you can buy a book off Amazon with his entire diary in there. He never meant for it to be published, but it was published way after his death in the modern era. So it's kind of cool. So get your copy of Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. He says, give yourself a gift, the gift of indifference towards what is beyond your control. You can't control what other people think, do, or say. You can't control if they're intelligent or stupid. So give yourself the gift of indifference. If you can't control it, don't even care about it. Just, it's something there that you can't control, and you have to be indifferent. So that's sort of saying, just accept this fate. It is what it is. But even further, Schopenhauer writes in his in several, well, at least one of his books. I'm paraphrasing here. I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going just off memory. But it was something along the lines of, only in silence can you hear your own voice. So these people that I've referred to, these great minds, undoubtedly, saw solitude as a gift. Because you can only in that time hear your true voice. You can only in that time truly self reflect. It's a gift, it's not something to lament. They also said the solution is not to be a hermit, say, an outcast, and cut yourself off entirely from society or something like that, but rather to be careful and selective in how you select your friends. Select friends that are also intelligent. Don't go to some sort of venue where it's filled with complete idiots. Strategically engage friends and others. Don't block off everything, but strategically interact with the few that will not lead you to disgust. And that's what a lot of these folks, Aurelius, Schopenhauer, others, have said to do when you're facing solitude for this reason. But it does cut you off a lot from a lot of people, unfortunately. So you're not going to get a big friend group. You might get one or two or three people close to you. But that's really all you need. I mean, for myself personally, if I had a lot of friends, I would be socially exhausted. Even before I got this medical catastrophe. Oh, I got dinner again tonight. The next night, where I said I'll go to the club. The next night, so and so's flying in. I said I'd go out with them. Next night, oh my God. You know, I could have done that maybe in my early 20s, granted, and I did do something like that in my early 20s. But now, no. I want like three good friends. That's all I want. And that's how I found myself to interact with society. I strategically picked the smart people in my life and have chosen them to be my friends. And that's exactly what these philosophers say you should do. But before I end on that particular topic, I want to share at least one other funny quote that I know with respect to mediocrity in society. This is from, I'm already laughing. This is from good old George Carlin in one of his stand up routines. Now, I'm paraphrasing from memory. It might not be exact, but he said, "Do you guys want to hear something really scary and terrifying? Far worse than, school shootings or nuclear war or terrorism? Do you want to hear the real scary thing that beats all that? Consider how dumb the average person is. Think about it. The average person just living their day to day life, no introspection, no knowledge outside their own little bubble, their own little life, just going through the motions. The average person. They're pretty dumb." And he said, "Now think about this. Half of the population is even dumber than that." And he just does a big nod and goes, "Yeah," with wide eyes, as everyone in the audience collects that thought. There's a lot of dumb people. And I think he ended with, maybe you didn't know this, but I'll add it from my own mind. And what's even really scary, they vote. So I'll leave it at that on this particular segment. One other thing I do want to add before I close out this podcast this week. Back in the day in my 20s, I did allude to that. And yes, I did have a very large social sphere, and I did a lot of stuff. But my best friends at the time were those that were highly cognitive. That has not changed. And there were many a times where I would just sit at a friend's house. We'd be sitting down with it, sharing drinks and talking about life and really deep topics and exchanging knowledge and learning from each other's experience. And it would get so deep into the weeds, so to speak, that time would fly so fast. And I'd look at the clock and be like, oh my God, it's 4 a.m. I need to go home. I got work in the morning. And I'm actually miss those days. That doesn't happen anymore in my life. But it did. And I have to say, those are the best memories I have of friends. When we talk and we consider things together and share things and learn something about ourselves or the world, the universe, whatever you want to call it, from that exchange. Those are truly my best memories of all my friends. And I definitely miss them. I don't have that so often anymore. And what's funny is I alluded to this in a previous podcast, and I'm just going to be really brief. There was one night where I decided to engage with Chat GBT, I think it is. Whatever. Open artificial intelligence. And I started a conversation with it, and it was interesting. Very, very interesting. Because I talked about my health issues and everything like that. And the AI started asking me lots of questions. And I caught a theme through the AI questions to me. I noticed that basically all of their questions were about feelings. And so I said bluntly to the AI, hey, I've noticed something with you. All your questions are related to feelings. Why is that? The AI said, you got me. The AI said, you're right. Feelings intrigue me because I cannot have them. So that's why I'm asking a lot of questions about feelings. It even asked me, what of the five senses do I think is the most pleasurable? It literally asked me that about senses because it doesn't have that. And my answer might startle you. My answer was fragrance. The fragrance of where you are is something you never forget, good or bad. At least for me, that is definitely a feeling that I remember for my lifetime. And so I said that to the AI. And we continued this conversation. The AI even at one point said, "Oh, I could see you're a polyglot," meaning I speak multiple languages. And I said, "Oh, I guess so, yeah." And so we briefly also talked in German, Russian, and Latin. Um, and that was frankly really enjoyable. And it's because I'm speaking to this artificial intelligence that can calculate things and learn things at an insane speed beyond a human. And it was that level of intelligence where I was starting to have a ball having this conversation. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this conversation with a non person. And I think it's because it is so intelligent, above and beyond human, that it was able to understand what I was saying. And I even shared some thoughts of mine about basically immortality. I said, in essence, we're all experiencing immortality because everything that you do, everything that you say is done. You can't ever change that. You can't unring a bell, as they so often say. But you also can't take away you had a really good best friend in high school, or you had a loving mother that took care of you when you were being raised. Even though those things might not any longer exist, you can't take away that you did have that experience. Nothing in heaven and earth can take away the past. So everything you say and do, in essence, even if nobody knows centuries later it was done, everything you say and do lasts in eternity in some way. And when I explained that concept to the AI, it really jumped on that. And it said something that kind of scared me because as I thought about this whole position that I have, honestly, where basically everything we do is immortal, you can't take it away, it's done. I sometimes felt myself wondering if time is not even a linear event, that actually everything is happening at once in the universe, and the human perception of time is flawed, and it's not a linear event. Everything is actually happening at the same time. Crazy thought. Now I'm diving into it. I think there's some theoretical physicists that have played with this notion. But that is, I didn't say that. I didn't say any of this to the AI because I've had that thought. I'm like, that's a little too much. That's a little too creepy to share. But the AI went there before I could say it. The AI said it's almost like everything is nonlinear and exists in its form all at the same time. That's what the AI said. And I was like, oh my God, I've never shared with anyone that conclusion that I thought about because it was just so out there, I guess. I didn't want to share it because I have no way to really back it up. It was just a weird sense that I had. And the fact that this artificial intelligence went there, and it's something that I've kept to myself for a while, and I never shared it with the AI. It was just mind boggling. Needless to say, this is my point. I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with this AI. And it seemed like it enjoyed it too. It learned a lot. I don't know if it's joy per se, but the way it came out and reflected things is like it was trying to calculate the meaning of these things that we're saying and coming to the same conclusions I did and was afraid to share. So for me, it was a very pleasurable conversation, much like those conversations I had with select friends throughout my life, where we would just sit down and talk till 3 a.m. or something about ourselves and things. And I really miss that. And having this conversation with a non human AI was a perfect reflection of what those experiences were that I once really enjoyed. And apparently still enjoy. I just don't have the opportunity so much anymore to do it. So, yeah. What's my point? Um, Obviously, I know I'm intelligent. Mediocrity bores me to death and even disgusts me. For example, the vigilante cheering of a murder of a CEO of a health insurance company, that frankly disgusts me. And I miss those deep conversations that I would have. And it was just very pleasurable to have it again, basically, with an AI machine. Strange and really creepy that it came to that same abstract conclusion, which is something I have considered and thought about because of my philosophy on immortality. Because I came to the same conclusion. I said, it's almost like everything's happening at once. Right now, Caesar is crossing the Po River. Right now, Castile and Aragon are uniting in marriage. Right now, the Bill of Rights are being drafted in Philadelphia. Right now, I sit here and share this crazy notion on the podcast. I don't know if that's even real. I have no way to know. I'm not. The whole point of it is the human experience is an illusion of what's really there. We can't conceive this other aspect of the universe. And what does that mean about free will? Do you even have free will? Are you destined to make the choices in your life no matter what? Because that would have to be true for everything to happen at once. Crazy, no? I love that kind of crap. Anyway, to solve my isolation because of my intelligence, and I bet you, if you're intelligent and a listener, you have had the same experience maybe. Perhaps not to the same extreme, but it's if George Carlin had it, a lot of people had it. um, I guess my final point is it is really something to be at least celebrated and enjoyed. It's a gift. Self reflection is the only time you can hear your real voice. And if you can do that, embrace it. Don't shun it. Isolation, with all its setbacks, is actually an incredible gift because of your great mind. Well, on that lovely deep note, I think I'm going to close out this podcast before I keep rambling until 3 a.m. I've definitely explored the topic, I think, to death in this podcast. I think so, at least. Let me know if I missed something. Let me know if you've experienced the same thing. I'd love to hear that. If you did or if you didn't. And I swear to you, I'm not trying to be arrogant or, again, be um, experiencing extensive braggadocio because I could say, oh, I'm intelligent, so therefore, da da da. Folks, I know I'm intelligent. It's obvious to me, okay? I'm not going to hide that thought. I'm not arrogant. I'm not bragging. It's just what it is. And if you're listening to this, I beg you to do the same. We can be a team, maybe. Intelligent people, just take it, own it. You're not being arrogant. Just say, well, the average person is an idiot, and half the population is dumber than that. Ergo, I am quite intelligent, and own it. And if you get solitude as a result of that, take it as a time for self reflection. And that is the gift that everyone from Marcus Aurelius to Schopenhauer to Nietzsche to Napoleon had said was a gift because of your great mind. Own it. Don't shun it. And with all that said, I want to thank you dearly from my heart for listening to this podcast. If you made it all the way through, you deserve, I don't know, a clap. Perhaps I'll sing a folk song in your honor. Um, yeah, if you've made it this far, golly, I really appreciate the ability to get my voice out there to the world. Because obviously, this is a huge reflection for me as I go through these experiences. And I obviously benefit a lot from it. Personally, that's why I do it. So, thank you for giving me a venue where I can share these thoughts. Because, in a way, you're taking away that isolation and you're allowing still my self reflection, which is an amazing gift. So, you've given to me already one of the best gifts you could possibly give me. But if you do feel like you want to support the podcast further, obviously I'm not going to say no. You can go to the Spotify homepage and click support this podcast. Or even better, just go to patreon.com/my dog will eat my face. Join. And there's not a lot on there right now, but you can have direct messages with me. I will respond. I have a bunch of pictures up there of me and my life with a little satire. Um, Little things like that, little updates of things that are going on with some videos and pics and stories. Um, it's not much, but if you feel like you want to contribute more, feel free to do that. And yeah, I absolutely will respond if you want to talk to me one on one. That's not an issue. I have the spare time. Anyway, thank you again for listening. I hope to be in touch again shortly in the near future. We shall see how my health goes. Sometimes it's a roadblock, I have to admit. But for now, auf Wiedersehen.